So picture this. It's 1925. It's been 13 years since China's last emperor was overthrown, and the country is a nation in name only. It's really just a chaotic patchwork of territories run by powerful warlords, these generals who'd carved up the country for themselves. Any hope for a unified China seemed to have died with the great revolutionary leader Sun Yat-sen. All right, let's dive into this incredible, chaotic struggle for the soul of a nation.
And that's really the question at the heart of this entire story, isn't it? When your country is literally tearing itself apart, with everyone fighting for their own piece of the pie, where do you even start to put it all back together?
Just look at this number, 1.5 million soldiers. It's staggering. But here's the kicker. This wasn't one single national army. Oh no, these were all private armies, loyal only to the warlords and generals who paid them. That's the sheer scale of the division China was up against.
So who's going to step into this mess? Well, that would be Sun Yat-sen's successor, a 37-year-old general named Chiang Kai-shek. He's the head of the Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang. And he is ambitious, he's a skilled military mind, and he truly believes he is the one man destined to finish the revolution and finally unite China. Now, Chiang knew he couldn't do it alone, so he had to work with let's call them an unlikely partner. It was called the First United Front, this super uneasy alliance between his nationalists and the much, much smaller Chinese Communist Party. They had one shared goal: get rid of the warlords. But that's where the similarities ended. Chiang just did not trust his Soviet-backed allies. He saw their ideology as a total poison. So, with this shaky, fragile alliance in place, Chiang makes his big move. He launches the Northern Expedition. This was a massive military campaign, a huge gamble, designed to march north and just crush the warlords one by one, bringing the whole country under his government. And you know what? At first, it worked. It was a brilliant success. The combined army just swept north, and warlord forces either fell apart or switched sides. Victory seemed like it was right around the corner. But with every single victory, the tension between the two sides just got worse and worse. Chiang is watching the communists gain influence with workers and peasants, and his suspicion starts turning into real alarm. Everything came to a head right at the gates of Shanghai, which was the most important, wealthiest city in China. Now get this, before Chiang's army even got there, communist organizers, led by a young guy named Zhou Enlai, started a workers' uprising and took over the city from the inside. So now, Chiang has a choice. Does he enter Shanghai as a hero or as a conqueror of his own allies? Well, Chiang didn't think twice. He had deep connections with Shanghai's powerful criminal gangs, and he decided this was his moment. It was time to get rid of the communist threat for good. On April 12, 1927, Chiang unleashed hell. His troops, along with their gangster allies, started a wave of terror. This number, 12,000, that's the rough count of how many communists and union leaders were rounded up, executed, or just disappeared. The First United Front was over, drowned in blood. The Chinese Civil War was on. Despite that absolute bloodbath, Chiang just kept on marching north. By 1928, he captures the old capital, Beijing, and he sets up a new government in Nanjing. So, on paper, it looks like he did it. China was finally unified. But that peace? It was a total illusion. Because right from the get-go, Chiang's new republic was fighting for its life. And it wasn't a war on one front. It was on three, all at the same time. First, you had the warlords, some of the same guys who were his allies, who immediately turned on him. So boom, back to civil war. Then you had the communists. Yeah, they were hammered in Shanghai, but they were not broken. They regrouped in the countryside and started their own fight. And then there's the biggest threat of all, looming in the northeast, Imperial Japan. In 1931, they faked an incident, the Moktan Incident, as an excuse to invade and just take over Manchuria. Faced with all of this, Chiang made an incredibly controversial decision, and it's summed up perfectly by this quote. He basically said the communists were the real problem, a disease of the heart, while the Japanese invasion was just a disease of the skin. His plan? He was going to crush his enemies at home first, and only then would he deal with the foreign invaders. So this policy led to these huge military operations called encirclement campaigns. The whole point was to surround the communist base in Jiangxi province and just wipe them off the map. And this relentless pressure is what forced his enemies into one of the most legendary and brutal retreats in all of military history. By 1934, Chiang thinks he's got them. He's got nearly 1 million troops closing in for the final kill. The communists are trapped, they're facing total annihilation, and so about 100,000 of them, they break out. They begin a desperate escape. And what followed was just unbelievable. For over a year, they just marched 8,000 kilometers on foot. They crossed deadly rivers, snow-covered mountains, all while being hunted and attacked by nationalist planes and soldiers pretty much the entire way. The cost was just astronomical. Less than 1 in 10. Think about that. Fewer than 10% of the people who started the march actually made it to their new safe haven in the north. But here's the wild paradox. This absolute, crushing defeat is what forged the communists into a hardened, fiercely loyal force. And it cemented the undisputed leadership of one man, Mao Zedong. The Long March became their foundational myth. Okay, so the communists look like they're totally on the ropes, about to be wiped out for good, and then something happens that is so bizarre, so dramatic, you would think it was made up for a movie. And this whole crazy story comes down to one guy, Zhang Shaling, known as the Young Marshal. Now, his homeland, Manchuria, had been taken over by the Japanese, and he was absolutely furious that Chiang Kai-shek was ordering him to use his army to fight other Chinese people, the communists, instead of the invaders. He was fed up, and he decided to do something about it. So, how do you convince your supreme commander to completely change his country's entire strategy? Do you beg him? Do you protest? What do you do? Well, Zhang's plan was a little more direct. That's right, a kidnapping. In December of 1936, Chiang was visiting the city of Xi'an, and Zhang Shulang ordered his own troops to storm the building and take their commander-in-chief prisoner. He literally kidnapped the leader of China. Zhang's demand was simple: stop the civil war and unite China to fight Japan. And what happens next is one of the most surreal moments in history. Chiang, the prisoner, is forced to negotiate with the communists, including Zhou Enlai, the very man he tried to have killed in Shanghai. And in exchange for his own life, Chiang agrees to form a second united front. And just look how fast everything moves after that. The kidnapping in December forces this new alliance. And it was just in time, because only 7 months later, a small skirmish between Chinese and Japanese troops at the Marco Polo Bridge near Beijing absolutely explodes into a full-scale, all-out war. And that's where we leave things. A nation that had just spent a decade trying to destroy itself was now in a forced alliance to face a ruthless, invading empire. So the huge question hanging over everything was this: could this alliance of bitter enemies possibly hold together long enough to save their country? Or would their hatred for each other end up being China's ultimate downfall?